Virginia Satir reveals the truth about the emotional abandonment that no one wants to admit. When love comes with conditions. Let me ask you something personal. Did you only feel loved when you got everything right? When you obeyed? When you were polite, helpful, or had good grades? When you were quiet instead of loud? Smiling instead of angry? Agreeing instead of questioning? If that question made your chest tighten, you're not alone. Many of us grew up in homes where love was not given freely. It was earned, given as a reward, taken away as punishment. We didn't learn that we were lovable just for being who we were. We learned that love had strings attached. It's a quiet kind of pain, a wound that doesn't bleed, but one that shapes the rest of your life. The hidden message of conditional love. When a child only receives affection, attention, or praise when they behave a certain way, they begin to believe a dangerous lie. I am only worthy of love when I perform. That performance can look different in each family. In some homes, it's academic success. In others, it's obedience, silence, helping everyone else. Sometimes, it's being the funny one, the responsible one, or the one who never causes trouble. Virginia Satir, one of the most respected family therapists in the world, once said, "We must not allow the child to grow up with the belief that they are lovable only if they meet someone else's expectations." But sadly, many of us did. We learned early on to monitor our behavior, adjust our tone, suppress our emotions, all to avoid disapproval, all to avoid losing love. Love as a currency. In healthy families, love is a constant, not a reward. But in families where emotional maturity is lacking, love becomes a form of currency. You get affection if you succeed. You get approval if you don't upset anyone. You get hugged if you're being good. The problem is, the child doesn't see this as manipulation. They see it as normal. And without knowing, they build their entire identity around pleasing others. They begin to confuse being lovable with being useful. They start to believe, I need to earn my place in people's hearts. This belief is heavy. And the worst part? Most people carry it into adulthood without even realizing it. The child who performs becomes the adult who struggles. If you were that child, always trying to do more, always hoping to be seen, always walking on eggshells to keep the peace, you probably became an adult who struggles to say no, overthinks every interaction, apologizes even when you didn't do anything wrong, feels guilty for resting or taking up space, needs validation to feel worthy, hides your pain to avoid rejection. That's not your fault. It's the echo of a childhood where love had fine print, where you learned, I have to be perfect to be accepted. How conditional love silences the real you. Virginia Satir believed that when love is conditional, it silences the true self. You stop asking, who am I? And you start asking, who do I need to be for you to love me? This creates adults who are disconnected from their own emotions. They don't trust their needs. They don't know their limits. They've been trained to focus on what others need from them, not what they truly want. This is how we lose ourselves, not in one moment, but little by little. With every time we were praised for hiding our sadness, with every time we were loved for the mask, not the person underneath. You deserve to be loved for existing. A child should be loved not for their grades, their obedience, or their performance, but simply because they exist. You were supposed to feel safe being yourself, not perfect, not pleasing, just you. That's what unconditional love is. It says, you may make mistakes, you may have bad days, but my love for you doesn't change. But when that message is missing, we grow up looking for that kind of love in other places, in relationships, in success, in achievements, always hoping that this time, if we do enough, someone will finally love us for who we are, not for what we do. Breaking the pattern begins with awareness. If this is your story, the first step is recognizing the pattern, because once you see it, you can begin to heal it. You can begin to ask, what parts of myself have I hidden to be accepted? What emotions did I learn were not allowed? Where in my life am I still trying to earn love? Healing this wound doesn't mean blaming your parents forever. Many of them gave the love they were taught, which was also conditional. But now, as adults, we can make a different choice. A new message, you are enough. What if today you started giving yourself the love you always wanted from others? What if you stopped performing and started reconnecting with your real self? What if you looked in the mirror and said, I don't have to do anything to be worthy. I already am. Virginia Satir taught that change is possible at any age, but it begins when we speak to ourselves with truth and compassion. So today, maybe you pause, maybe you breathe, and maybe you whisper to the child inside you, you were never hard to love. You just lived in a place that didn't know how to love freely. What is conditional love? The love that comes with rules. What exactly is conditional love? It's a kind of love that comes wrapped in silent rules. Rules that say, I'll love you if you behave. I'll accept you when you stop crying. You're worthy as long as you don't disappoint me. It sounds like love. It often looks like love, but it doesn't feel like love deep inside, especially to a child. Conditional love says, you have to earn my affection, and the conditions are never stable. They can change depending on the adult's mood, stress level, or expectations. And so the child starts playing an invisible game they can never fully win. No matter how good they are, love always feels uncertain, like it can be taken away at any moment. What conditional love looks like in childhood. It's important to understand that conditional love doesn't always sound cruel. It's not always yelling or harsh punishment. Sometimes it shows up in praise, but praise with expectations. Like, you're such a good boy when you're quiet. I'm proud of you because you got an A. You're such a sweet girl when you help mommy. These words may seem harmless, even kind, but to a child, they teach a dangerous pattern. I'm loved because I performed, not just because I am me. And soon, the child begins to think, if I stop performing, will they stop loving me? The invisible contract Virginia Satir often talked about unspoken agreements in families. In homes with conditional love, there's an invisible contract that says, we will love you if you play your part. That part could be being the achiever, being the caretaker, being the peacemaker, being the easy child. And if you break the contract by being too loud, too sad, too angry, too needy, you're met with silence, distance, or disapproval. Not always through words, sometimes through withheld affection, a disappointed look, a cold shoulder, and that silence can be louder than any scream. Over time, the child learns, it's not safe to be my full self here, so they shrink, adapt, smile when they want to cry, say yes when they mean no. They become masters of self-abandonment just to keep the love flowing. Conditional love versus unconditional love. So how do we know the difference? Unconditional love says, you can fail, you can feel, you can struggle, I'm still here. Conditional love says, you better behave, you better succeed, or I might not be. Unconditional love is a safety net. Conditional love is a tightrope. Unconditional love lets the child become who they are. Conditional love trains the child to become who you want them to be. And there's a cost to that. Because when you are only loved for who you pretend to be, you lose the ability to know your true self. The emotional cost of conditional love. What happens when a child grows up never feeling fully accepted? They may become people pleasers who say yes to everyone but themselves, overachievers who link their value to performance, conflict avoiders, afraid to express their real needs, adults who don't know how to rest without guilt, partners who accept crumbs of love because they believe that's all they deserve. They might be outwardly successful, but inwardly exhausted, constantly seeking validation, worn out from trying to be good enough. And the saddest part? They often repeat the same cycle with their own children without even realizing it. The root of the pattern. So where does this pattern come from? Often, it's generational. Parents who offer love conditionally were once children who received it that way too. They didn't learn how to offer emotional safety because they never received it themselves. Virginia Satir believed that every person is doing the best they can with what they've been taught. But she also believed we have the power to learn new ways to love, to recognize the patterns, to question the rules, to break the silent contracts we inherited. Because love isn't supposed to be earned like a prize. It's supposed to be given like air, constant, life-giving, unconditional. How conditional love affects self-worth. When love is given based on conditions, self-worth becomes fragile. The child doesn't feel good enough unless they're performing. They don't trust their instincts. They second-guess their emotions. They fear rejection with every step. Imagine trying to build a house on sand. That's what conditional love does to a child's sense of self. There's no solid foundation because the message underneath was, you're not lovable just as you are. And unless that message is replaced, it echoes for life. You were meant to be loved without earning it. Every child deserves to feel seen, valued, and accepted, even when they're messy, loud, or imperfect. Virginia Satir often said that the most powerful message a person can receive is, you are lovable, you are worthy, just as you are. If you didn't receive that message as a child, it's not too late. You can begin to give it to yourself now. You can choose to treat yourself with the kind of love you always needed, not the kind you were conditioned to chase. Letting go of the rules. The rules of conditional love don't have to stay with you forever. You don't have to be perfect to be accepted. Stay silent to be safe. Carry everyone else to feel valuable. Perform to deserve rest. Hide your needs to be loved. You can rewrite those rules. You can say, I'm allowed to be human. I don't have to earn love anymore. Who I am is enough. The healing begins with truth. Healing begins when you name the truth, that what you experienced wasn't real love. It was performance-based affection. It begins when you stop trying to fix yourself to be lovable and start realizing you were lovable all along. You were just taught to believe otherwise. The hidden language of control. When love becomes a tool, most people imagine control as something loud and obvious, yelling, punishments, or strict rules. But some of the most powerful control in a family doesn't come through shouting. It comes quietly, through praise, through silence, through the simple words that follow a smile, or the lack of one. It's the kind of control that hides behind love. And when you're a child, it's nearly impossible to see, because it doesn't say, I'm controlling you. It says, I love you, but only when you act the way I want. This is the hidden language of control, and it often comes from conditional love. Love, the currency of obedience. In families where emotional maturity is missing, love becomes a tool, a way to shape, direct, or manage the child. It sounds like, you're such a good girl when you listen to me. I love you when you behave. That's my boy, always doing the right thing. At first glance, these sound positive, but underneath, they carry a message. Love is not who you are. Love is what you do. And if you stop doing what I want, my love might disappear. This is control wearing a smile. And children, desperate for love, learn to comply. They learn to adapt, shrink, twist themselves into shapes that earn approval, not connection. The fear behind the smile. If you grew up with this dynamic, maybe you didn't even realize it. Maybe you just remember being the easy child, the helpful one, the quiet one, the one who never caused problems. But if you look deeper, you might realize something. That role wasn't your personality. It was your survival strategy. You smiled to avoid conflict. You stayed quiet to avoid being ignored. You helped everyone to feel needed. You became who they wanted, because that's how you stayed loved. Virginia Satir taught that many children live not as themselves, but as symbols of what their family expects. They're not seen for who they are, but for the roles they play. The invisible scripts we inherit. In homes where conditional love reigns, there are often unspoken scripts, rules that no one says out loud, but everyone feels. Things like, don't talk back, don't cry, it makes others uncomfortable, don't ask for too much, be grateful, don't be angry, be nice. These aren't necessarily screamed or written down. They're absorbed through tone, through looks, through the silence after you speak your truth. And over time, the child stops expressing who they are and starts performing who the family wants. That is emotional control, not by force, but by fear of losing love. Approval as a weapon. When affection and attention are only given when a child is behaving well, approval becomes a weapon. You may remember moments like finally getting a hug after fixing your mistake, getting ignored until you apologized, even if you weren't wrong, earning a smile only when you were polite enough, being told, now I'm proud of you, only after exhausting yourself to meet expectations. What happens next is predictable. You begin to chase approval like oxygen. You learn that the quickest way to feel safe is to please, and that mindset follows you into adulthood. It shows up at work, in friendships, in romantic relationships, always asking, am I doing enough to be loved today? Love was used to control your behavior. Let's name it clearly. When love is used to control behavior, it stops being love and becomes manipulation. Maybe your parents didn't know they were doing it. Maybe they truly believed they were guiding you, raising you right, but the result is still the same. You learn that love could be taken away, and that fear is powerful. It teaches you to stay small, to keep quiet, to please, no matter the cost. Virginia Satir warned that when we confuse love with approval, we disconnect from our true selves. We become reflections, not individuals. Why control, disguised as love, hurts more? There's a deep confusion that happens when control comes wrapped in affection, because the child thinks, if they're being nice, it must be love. If they're hugging me, then I'm safe. If I disappoint them and they pull away, it must be my fault. They internalize every reaction as proof of their worth, which means every time love is withdrawn, the child blames themselves. And when this cycle repeats, they start to believe a toxic lie. If someone loves me, I must do whatever it takes to keep them happy. This is not love. This is emotional dependency built on fear. The cost: losing yourself to be loved. The longer you live under this dynamic, the more you lose access to your authentic self. You stop asking, what do I feel? What do I need? What do I want? And instead you ask, what do they want from me? What version of me is safest? How do I avoid disappointing them? This disconnection is painful, and yet it can be so familiar that you mistake it for personality. But Virginia Satir believed something powerful. You are not your role. You are not your mask. You are the person underneath, waiting to be loved without condition. On Breaking Free starts with naming the control. To break this pattern, you must first name what happened. Say it to yourself. They used love to control me. I adapted to survive. I played the role to be accepted. That is not weakness. That is resilience. But you don't have to keep doing it. You don't have to keep being the version of yourself that others prefer. You can begin to reclaim your own voice, even if it shakes. You can learn to say, I can disappoint someone and still be worthy. I can have needs and still be loved. I no longer have to perform to feel safe. True love never requires disconnection. The truth is, real love doesn't require you to disconnect from yourself. It doesn't ask you to be smaller. It doesn't punish you for feeling deeply. It doesn't reward obedience with affection and withdraw it as punishment. Real love invites you to be whole, messy, loud, honest, and still completely worthy. That's the kind of love you deserved from the beginning. That's the kind of love you can learn to give yourself now. The fear of making mistakes, the emotional prison. What happens to a child who learns that love disappears when they mess up? They don't just fear punishment, they fear rejection. They fear abandonment. And over time, they begin to fear something even deeper, being themselves. In homes where affection is tied to performance, mistakes become dangerous. A bad grade isn't just a bad grade, it's a threat to being loved. Disagreeing isn't just a conversation, it's a risk of emotional exile. Crying too much, saying the wrong thing, acting out, even having a bad day, all of it becomes a reason to feel ashamed. This is how the fear of making mistakes becomes a prison, not with bars and chains, but with anxiety, shame, and silence. When errors are seen as failures of worth, in a healthy home, mistakes are part of growth. They're met with understanding, not humiliation. The child hears, you messed up, but I still love you. Let's figure this out together. It's okay, we all make mistakes. But in a home ruled by conditional love, the message sounds more like, how could you do this? You've disappointed me. You should have known better. And even if those words aren't spoken directly, they're often communicated through tone, withdrawal, or emotional coldness. The child begins to equate mistakes with unworthiness. Not just, I did something wrong, but I am something wrong. Virginia Satir warned of this deep confusion. When a child cannot separate their behavior from their identity, shame takes root, living under the pressure of perfection. If you were that child, always trying not to fail, always terrified of doing something wrong, you probably still carry that pressure. Maybe today it shows up like this. You triple-check everything, afraid of being criticized. You overthink simple decisions. You struggle to rest unless you've earned it. You apologize for things that weren't your fault. You feel panicked when someone is disappointed in you. You can't tolerate even mild disapproval without spiraling. This isn't because you're weak. It's because you learned that a single mistake could cost you love. You were trained to survive, not to thrive. The shame that follows you. The shame born in childhood doesn't stay in childhood. It becomes a quiet voice in your mind. Don't mess this up. They're going to see you're not good enough. You always ruin things. You should have known better. And this shame is exhausting. It doesn't motivate. It paralyzes. It makes you second-guess compliments. It makes you feel unworthy of love unless you're constantly achieving. It makes you feel like a burden, even when you've done nothing wrong. Virginia Satir believed that shame is not a natural part of who we are. It's a message we were taught, a lie that says, you are lovable only when you're flawless. But no one is flawless. So the person carrying this wound is always waiting for the day they'll be found out and abandoned. The fear of disappointing becomes the fear of being. For many, the fear of making mistakes becomes so overwhelming that they stop taking risks altogether. They avoid speaking up, trying new things, asking for help, setting boundaries, expressing needs. Why? Because all of those things carry the risk of doing it wrong. And doing it wrong in their mind means being unloved. Eventually, this fear doesn't just limit what they do, it limits who they become. They shrink their dreams, they dim their light, they censor their voice, all in the name of being safe. But it's not real safety, it's survival. And surviving is not the same as living. Perfectionism, the mask of the wounded. Many adults who were raised under the weight of conditional love wear perfectionism like armor. They think, if I'm perfect, no one will reject me. If I never make mistakes, I'll always be loved. If I work hard enough, I can finally feel safe. But perfectionism is a lie. It doesn't protect you from pain. It just keeps you in a constant state of fear. Virginia Satir once said, "We must not confuse excellence with perfection. One is healthy striving. The other is fear in disguise. Trying to do your best is human, but demanding perfection is a symptom of trauma, not character. You were not meant to be perfect. You were meant to be loved." Every child should grow up knowing that they can make mistakes without losing love. That love is not a reward, it's a foundation. But if you didn't have that, you may still be waiting for the moment when you've finally done enough to deserve love. Let this be the moment you stop waiting. Because love isn't something you earn by being flawless. It's something you receive for being fully human. Mistakes are not failures. They are part of learning. They are the doorway to growth, to truth, to resilience. And if no one told you that before, let me say it now. You are allowed to make mistakes. You are allowed to fall and try again. You are allowed to be imperfect and still be lovable. Healing the fear begins with permission. Give yourself permission to mess up, be clumsy, learn slowly, say the wrong thing and apologize, be human. The goal isn't perfection, it's connection with others, with life, with your true self who's been waiting behind the pressure and shame. Virginia Satir believed that true healing comes when we replace fear with understanding. So the next time you hear that inner voice telling you that you failed, try whispering back, "I'm not failing, I'm growing. I'm not broken, I'm healing. I'm not unlovable, I'm learning to love myself differently." You've lived long enough in fear. Now, it's time to breathe. The pain of only being loved when you please, losing yourself to be accepted. There is a specific kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from being hated. It comes from being loved only when you please, only when you behave, only when you perform, only when you make others feel good. It's not hatred that wounds the soul the deepest. It's conditional affection that teaches you, who I truly am is not enough. If you grew up in a home where love was tied to how much you pleased others, you probably learned very early to become what others needed, not who you really were. And at first, it seems like survival. But over time, it becomes a life of emotional exile. The early lessons: be good so you'll be loved. Children don't need anyone to say the words out loud. They feel it. They feel when love comes after achievement. They feel when warmth is given after they stay quiet. They feel when anger or sadness causes people to pull away. So they learn. Don't speak too much. Don't cry too loud. Don't be too much of anything. Keep the peace. Keep smiling. Keep giving. This is the unspoken message. You are lovable as long as you don't upset anyone. Virginia Satir wrote extensively about how families shape identity. She taught that when a child is only accepted for being pleasing, they slowly lose their connection with their inner truth. They learn to read the room before they speak. They become experts at adjusting, shaping their behavior to meet expectations they can't even name. Love that demands a performance. Imagine this. You walk into the room, not as yourself, but as a role. The helpful daughter, the smart one, the easy one, the funny one, the child who never complains, who always makes life easier for everyone else. Each time you act out that role, you get rewarded with smiles, praise, affection. But the moment you step out of character, if you express anger, ask for too much, need comfort, cry at the wrong time, the love fades. The warmth is gone. You begin to think, maybe my real self isn't lovable, only my mask is. That is not love. That is emotional training, and it teaches you to betray yourself. The cost of being the pleaser. As a child, being the pleaser earns you safety. As an adult, it costs you your soul. You might now find yourself saying yes when you want to say no, staying in relationships that drain you, avoiding conflict at all costs, feeling responsible for everyone's happiness, struggling to ask for help, feeling invisible, even in rooms full of people. You become someone who exists more for others than for yourself. And slowly, you begin to wonder, where did I go? Virginia Satir taught that the core of healing is reclaiming the self, the real, messy, feeling, authentic self that was hidden to earn love, the silent burnout of self-abandonment. Living to please is a slow kind of burnout. You don't just lose energy, you lose identity, and the worst part? No one notices. People think you're doing great, you're kind, generous, so easy to be around, but inside, you feel empty. Not because you lack love, but because you've given it all away, hoping some would come back to you. It's hard to feel loved when you're never really seen, because the version you show is the version they like, not the person you truly are. That emptiness isn't weakness, it's the echo of a self that's been waiting to come home. How this pattern repeats in adulthood. Adults who were only loved when they pleased often carry this into every part of life. In friendships, they overgive. In relationships, they overadapt. At work, they overwork. They tolerate being overlooked. They silence their needs. They apologize for existing because deep inside they believe, if I stop pleasing, I'll lose love. But this belief keeps them in one-sided relationships, emotional exhaustion, and silent resentment. Virginia Satir reminded us that people hunger for the experience of being truly known and loved at the same time. That hunger doesn't go away. It just gets buried beneath performance. The grief beneath the smile. There's a grief that pleasers often carry, a quiet, lonely grief. The grief of never being loved for their truth, only for their usefulness, only for their smile, only for what they gave. You might not have realized it until recently. You might have believed that everyone struggles like this, but it's not normal, and it's not your fault. You were trained to earn love instead of receive it. But that doesn't mean you're not worthy of unconditional love now. You are. Your needs are not a burden. Let me say that clearly. Your voice is not too loud. Your emotions are not too much. Your needs are not selfish. Your truth is not inconvenient. The people who made you feel like love had to be earned were speaking from their own wounds. You don't have to carry that wound anymore. You can learn to speak your truth, to show up as yourself, to disappoint others if it means honoring who you are. Virginia Satir believed that self-worth doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from being deeply connected to your inner truth, learning to please yourself first. What if the next chapter of your life wasn't about being agreeable? What if it was about being authentic? You get to say what you feel, ask for what you need, show your full self, not just the easy parts. Rest without guilt, be messy, loud, imperfect, and still loved. That's what you deserved all along. You never had to earn love. You only needed to be somewhere it was given freely, and now you can become that place for yourself. The root of low self-esteem. When love had conditions, low self-esteem doesn't start with failure. It doesn't begin with a mistake or a moment of shame. It begins the day a child learns, love has conditions. I'm only valuable when I do something right. I have to become someone else to be accepted. That belief becomes the seed, and when it's watered by silence, pressure, and emotional distance, it grows into a life of doubt, anxiety, and self-rejection. Low self-esteem isn't a flaw. It's a response to an emotional environment where love was not safe. When love is earned, worth becomes fragile. Think about a child who only receives warmth when they excel, or one who's only hugged after they behave, one who's scolded for crying but praised for helping. That child doesn't learn, I'm valuable. They learn, I'm only valuable if I make others happy. And that's not self-esteem. That's performance-based identity. Virginia Satir often said, we must not confuse our worth with the approval of others. But when we are raised on conditional love, the two get tangled. Suddenly, your entire sense of self is based on whether others are pleased with you. And if they're not, you feel invisible, unworthy, deeply broken. The inner voice becomes an inner critic. A child who is only loved when they meet expectations grows up with an internal voice that mimics that environment. Instead of encouragement, it offers, you're not doing enough. You'll never be as good as them. You're too emotional. You always mess things up. This voice doesn't just appear, it's built, shaped by years of experiences that said, you're loved when you perform, you're tolerated when you don't. Over time, this voice becomes louder than any compliment. No matter how much praise you receive, it never sinks in, because you don't believe it's about you. It's about the version of you that's been edited for approval, how it affects adult life. As an adult, this fragile self-worth shows up everywhere. In relationships, you settle for less than you deserve. You fear abandonment constantly. You overgive and expect little in return. return. At work, you downplay your accomplishments. You avoid leadership roles because you don't feel ready. You burn out trying to prove you're capable. In daily life, you second-guess yourself. You apologize for taking up space. You struggle to say what you want because you don't believe it matters. You've built a life on pleasing, adapting, performing, but deep inside, you feel like a fraud. Not because you are, but because no one ever taught you you're enough as you are. The constant comparison game. Low self-esteem also turns life into a constant game of comparison. You scroll through social media and feel behind. You walk into a room and immediately measure your worth against others. You feel smaller even when no one is trying to make you feel that way. Why? Because you were raised to see yourself through others' eyes, not through your own truth. And so, your value feels like a moving target, always just out of reach. Virginia Satir reminded us that comparison is the enemy of authenticity. We lose sight of who we are when we're constantly trying to be like someone else. Self-esteem requires unconditional acceptance. True self-esteem can only grow in a space of unconditional acceptance. That doesn't mean you think you're perfect. It means you know you're worthy, even when you're imperfect. But when love was tied to behavior, the child never got that message. Instead of learning, mistakes are part of life, they learned, mistakes make me unlovable. Instead of hearing, you are special because of who you are, they heard, you are special because of what you do. And when that pattern is repeated enough, it becomes the blueprint for their identity. Rebuilding the foundation from the inside out. Healing low self-esteem starts by naming the truth that your worth was never meant to depend on your performance, that you were born valuable before you did anything to deserve it, that the people who couldn't love you freely were speaking from their own wounds. You didn't fail. They failed to provide what you needed: emotional safety, consistent love, and room to grow. But here's the good news. As Virginia Satir believed, the past does not have to define the present or the future. People can change when they become aware, and you are becoming aware, giving yourself what was missing. If no one ever said these words to you, let them sink in now. You are not too much. You don't have to earn love. Your needs are valid. Your feelings are real. You are allowed to be seen fully. You are worthy of kindness, rest, joy, and belonging without performing. Self-esteem is not something you chase through achievement. It's something you build by coming home to yourself. Not the version of you others wanted, but the one that's always been there, waiting to be seen. Steps toward reclaiming your worth. You can begin right now by noticing when you judge yourself harshly, interrupting that voice with compassion, asking what your younger self needed to hear, and saying it, allowing imperfection without punishment. Choosing people who see your value even when you're not useful to them. Every time you do this, you plant a new seed, one that says, my value is not up for debate. It's already here, inside me. The power of reparenting yourself. You don't need to go back in time to receive what you missed. You can give it to yourself now. Be the parent you needed, who listens with patience, who loves without rules, who offers comfort, not critique, who allows mistakes, softness, and rest. Virginia Satir believed that every person holds the capacity to heal themselves when given the right tools, and the most powerful tool is self-love without conditions. It may feel unfamiliar, but that's okay. You're learning a new language, one that your soul has always known. The adult who lives to please, the legacy of conditional love. There's a kind of adult who seems kind, reliable, always helpful. They're the ones who never complain, who always make space for others, who say yes even when they want to scream no. But beneath the surface, there's a quiet sadness, a sense of invisibility, a constant fear of being too much or not enough. This is the adult who grew up only being loved when they pleased. And now, they live to please everyone around them, not because they're weak, but because, somewhere along the way, they were taught, if you don't make people happy, you might lose love. How conditional love becomes a lifelong habit. When you're raised in a home where love is tied to performance, you don't grow up with freedom, you grow up with pressure. Pressure to behave, achieve, obey, smile, fit. You're trained to scan every room for expectations. You anticipate needs before anyone speaks. You fix things that aren't yours to fix, because that's how you learn to stay safe. Virginia Satir called this the loss of authentic self-expression. Instead of growing into who you are, you grow into who the family needed you to be. And you carry that into adulthood like a second skin. People-pleasing, a survival strategy in disguise. You don't choose to become a people-pleaser. You're conditioned into it. You learn that being helpful brings praise, that keeping quiet avoids conflict, that taking care of others gives you a sense of purpose, even if it costs your own needs. You tell yourself, it's just who I am. I like making people happy. I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to cause trouble. They need me. But deep down, there's a fear. If I stop pleasing, will they still love me? This fear doesn't vanish with age. It follows you into relationships, work, parenting, friendships. You become the one who carries everyone, but rarely feels carried. The signs: you're living to please. If you're unsure whether this applies to you, consider the following signs. You feel anxious when someone is disappointed in you. You say yes automatically, then feel resentment later. You avoid conflict, even when something deeply bothers you. You feel guilty resting or doing things for yourself. You apologize constantly, even when you've done nothing wrong. You worry that expressing your true feelings will push people away. You often feel invisible, yet always exhausted. You've become an expert at managing others' emotions, but disconnected from your own. Virginia Satir believed that when we sacrifice our identity for connection, we don't create real connection. We create dependency, guilt, and silent suffering. The hidden cost of being the good one. You may have been praised your whole life for being easy, helpful, accommodating, but that praise came at a price. You learned not to ask for too much. You silenced your pain so others could stay comfortable. You became a container for other people's emotions, while no one held space for yours. You were taught to not take up space, to not inconvenience, to not need too much. And so your life became a careful balancing act, always tending to others, never really belonging to yourself. That's not kindness. That's survival wrapped in politeness. Why it's so hard to stop. You may want to break the cycle, to say no, to rest, to speak honestly. But every time you try, you feel terrified. Why? Because your nervous system associates displeasing others with danger. You were taught that love is conditional, so disappointing someone feels like rejection, and rejection feels like abandonment. It's not logic, it's programming. Virginia Satir said, "We must free ourselves from the belief that our worth depends on being accepted by others." But that's a hard belief to unlearn when it's been your foundation for love. The resentment. No one sees people pleasers don't usually look angry, but many are holding on to deep resentment. Resentment for always being the one who compromises. Resentment for never feeling fully loved, only useful. Resentment for giving and giving, but never receiving the same in return. And because expressing that resentment feels selfish or wrong, it stays buried. But unspoken resentment doesn't disappear. It hardens into emotional exhaustion. It turns into burnout. It numbs your joy. You deserve better than a life of quiet self-sacrifice. Reclaiming your right to be fully you. You are allowed to say no without guilt, disappoint others without shame, rest without earning it, express needs without apology, be seen, not just for what you do, but for who you are. That's not selfish, that's healthy. Virginia Satir believed in the power of self-congruence, the state of being aligned with your inner truth, not what others want, not what they expect, but what is real for you. And healing begins the moment you choose your truth over your role. Steps toward healing. Here are small ways to start coming back to yourself. Pause before saying yes. Ask, do I really want to do this? Check in with your feelings, not what others feel, what you feel. Practice disappointing someone, kindly but clearly. And notice, the world doesn't end. Affirm your right to take up space. Say out loud, my needs matter too. Surround yourself with people who love you without strings, not for what you give, but for who you are. You were never meant to earn love. Let this truth settle deep into your heart. You were not born to please. You were born to be whole. And the people who truly love you, they don't need you to shrink, silence yourself, or perform. They want your full presence, your truth, your depth, your humanness. It's okay to stop trying so hard. It's okay to come home to yourself. You are already enough. The false identity, who you had to become to be loved. At some point in childhood, many of us made an unconscious choice. If I have to change who I am to be loved, then I will. Not because we were manipulative, not because we were trying to deceive anyone, but because survival depended on it. When love is not freely given, the child begins to shape themselves into the version that gets the most approval. They learn which emotions are acceptable, which traits get praised, and which parts of them must be hidden. This is how the false identity is born, and this false self becomes a mask, one worn for years, sometimes decades, all in the name of staying connected. But what's the cost of wearing a mask for too long? Eventually, you forget what your real face even looks like. The birth of the false self, a child who doesn't feel loved simply for being, begins to scan the environment for clues. They smiled when I got good grades, so I'll be the achiever. They hugged me when I made them laugh, so I'll be the clown. They were proud when I helped, so I'll be the caretaker. They ignored me when I cried, so I'll be the strong one. They liked me quiet, so I'll never speak too loud again. Piece by piece, the child begins to shape a version of themselves that is easier to love, a version that doesn't rock the boat, a version that knows what to suppress. This version is not false because it's fake. It's false because it's incomplete. It's who the child needed to be, not who they truly are. Roles that replace identity. Virginia Satir spoke often about family roles. In dysfunctional systems, children adapt by filling invisible roles that bring balance to a chaotic or emotionally unavailable environment. Common roles include the hero, the perfect child, high-achieving, responsible, always good. The caregiver, the emotional support for everyone else, mature beyond their years. The peacemaker, the one who smooths over conflict, avoids tension, keeps harmony. The rebel, the one who acts out, creating distraction from deeper issues. The ghost, the quiet one, invisible, never a problem. Each role has a purpose: to gain approval, reduce stress, or avoid abandonment. But none of them allow the child to be fully human. And as they grow, they don't outgrow the role. They carry it into adulthood. Living through a mask. Adults who developed a false identity often don't realize they're wearing a mask because it's all they've ever known. They live through it every day, always being the helper, even when they're the one who's hurting, always being the achiever, afraid of stopping to rest, always being the peacemaker, even when conflict is needed, always being fine, even when their heart is breaking. They look successful, they seem composed, they're admired, but inside there's an emptiness, a quiet ache that says, I'm loved for the role I play, not for the person I am. The deep loneliness of the false self. One of the most painful parts of living through a mask is the loneliness, because even when you're surrounded by people, you don't feel truly seen. Why? Because the version they love isn't the real you. It's the edited you, the curated you, the version that pleases and performs. And deep down you think, if they really knew me, would they still stay? So you keep playing the part, smiling, helping, performing, even when it's killing you inside. Virginia Satir believed that true connection is only possible when we are fully congruent, when our internal experience matches our external expression. But when love was conditional, we learned to split ourselves in two. Signs you've been living through a false identity. You may be living from a false self if you feel like no one truly knows you, struggle to answer the question, what do I want? Feel exhausted from constantly holding it together. Say yes when you want to scream no. Avoid conflict even at the cost of your own needs. Feel like a fraud even when others praise you. Rarely express anger, sadness, or vulnerability, except in private. This is not because you're broken. It's because you learned that authenticity was unsafe. And so, you traded truth for connection. But now that you're an adult, that trade is killing your spirit. You are more than the role you played. Here is the truth. You are not just the strong one. You are not just the funny one. You are not just the smart one, or reliable one, or easy one. You are a whole person with rage, joy, grief, softness, confusion, power, depth, and you deserve to be loved for all of that. Not just for the parts that made others comfortable. Virginia Satir wrote, "The greatest gift you can give yourself is permission to be who you truly are. That gift may feel scary, but it is the only path to healing. Removing the mask, gently. You don't have to rip the mask off all at once. You've worn it for years, maybe even decades. It protected you. It kept you safe, but now it's suffocating you. So begin gently. Start noticing when you're performing. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I show up honestly? Practice small acts of authenticity, even just with yourself. Speak your truth in safe spaces with people who have earned your vulnerability. Remind yourself, you deserve to be seen, not just admired. This is not rebellion. This is return. Return to your voice. Return to your body. Return to your truth. Wholeness was never the enemy. It was the goal. The parts of you that were silenced still live inside you. The curious child, the sensitive one, the fiery one, the one who cried too loudly, the one who dreamed too big, the one who felt too deeply. They didn't disappear. They were just tucked away, waiting for permission to come back. Now is the time to bring them home. Virginia Satir believed that every person has the inner resources needed for healing. They just need the space, the safety, and the permission to be whole. You have that permission now. Take off the mask. You don't need it anymore. Healing the wound of conditional love. Coming back to yourself. There is no wound more invisible than the one caused by conditional love. It doesn't bruise the skin. It doesn't leave scars you can point to, but it shapes everything. How you love, how you speak, how you breathe inside your own body. It teaches you to live for others, to suppress your needs, to earn every drop of love like currency. And it stays with you as quietly until one day you realize, I've spent my whole life trying to be lovable, but I've never truly felt loved. That is where healing begins. Not in blaming, not in bitterness, but in that first moment of truth. I was not loved in the way I needed, but I can learn to love myself differently now. Step 1. Name the wound. You can't heal what you won't name. And for many people, this is the hardest part, admitting that the people who raised them couldn't offer the kind of love they needed. It doesn't mean they didn't love you in their own way. It means that their way was limited. It came with rules. It came with pressure. It came with conditions. Virginia Satir taught that families pass down emotional patterns, not out of cruelty, but out of unawareness. Your caregivers likely learned conditional love from their caregivers, and you became another link in a chain that's been repeating for generations. But once you name it, the chain can break. You are not here to keep repeating the wound. You are here to heal it. Step 2. Grieve what was missing. Healing conditional love isn't just about looking forward. It's about mourning what you didn't receive. You may have to grieve the hug that never came when you cried, the praise that only arrived after achievement, the love you only felt when you were behaving, the emotional safety that was never offered, the truth you never felt safe to speak. This grief is real, and it doesn't mean you're stuck in the past. It means you are finally honoring the child inside you who deserved more. Virginia Satir believed that acknowledging pain is not weakness, it's the gateway to freedom. So cry if you need to. Write a letter to your younger self. Say the words no one said to you. Let the grief move through you so it doesn't keep living inside you. Step 3. Reconnect with your authentic self. Beneath the masks, the roles, and the pleasing, your real self still exists. She may be quiet, he may be cautious, but they are not gone. Start small. Ask yourself, what do I actually feel? What do I want? Not what's expected of me. Where in my life am I shrinking to make others comfortable? Start noticing when you smile to hide pain. Say yes out of fear, not desire. Avoid conflict even when your heart is aching. Every time you catch yourself in those moments, don't judge. Gently say, I'm learning to come back to myself. Virginia Satir said, feelings of worth can flourish only in an atmosphere where individual differences are appreciated, mistakes are tolerated, communication is open, and rules are flexible. You can now begin creating that atmosphere inside you. Step 4. Practice self-compassion. You will not unlearn a lifetime of conditional love overnight. You may still feel the urge to please, to perform, to prove your worth. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're healing. Talk to yourself the way you wish an adult had spoken to you when you were scared, sad, or messy. Say, it's okay to feel this way. You don't have to be perfect. I love you, even when you struggle. You are enough, right now. These words may feel awkward at first, but they are seeds. And with time, they grow into trust. Trust in yourself, and trust that you don't have to earn love anymore. Step 5. Build relationships rooted in truth. Once you begin healing, your tolerance for conditional love in others will shrink. You may begin to notice who only calls when they need something, who disappears when you're not cheerful, who praises you only when you're doing well, who can't hold space for your pain. Let those realizations guide you, not to anger, but to clarity. You now get to choose who gets access to your energy, who you share your truth with, who is safe enough to see the real you. And even more important, you get to become someone who offers unconditional love, not just to others, but to yourself. Virginia Satir believed that healed people create healing families, even if those families are chosen, not biological. Step 6. Redefine what love means to you. You were taught that love is conditional, earned, performance-based, uneven, fragile. But that definition is no longer yours. You now define love as safe, steady, nourishing, spacious, accepting. And the more you live by this new definition, the more your life begins to change. You no longer settle. You no longer perform. You no longer apologize for simply being. You begin to live, not just survive. You are not broken. You are becoming whole. You were never too needy. You were never too much. You were never wrong for wanting love without strings attached. The way you were loved was limited, but your capacity to heal is limitless. And now, you are no longer waiting for someone to hand you the love you never received. You are becoming the one who gives it to your inner child, your present self, and your future. This is the work. This is the return. This is the healing of a lifetime. Virginia Satir said, "We get together on the basis of our similarities. We grow on the basis of our differences. The real you, the one behind the pleasing and the perfection, is not a problem. They are the beginning of everything true. You are lovable. You are enough. You are free. The love you deserved doesn't have conditions. Learning to receive what was always meant for you. There's a kind of love that doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't demand. It doesn't disappear when you're messy, tired, moody, or falling apart. It doesn't arrive only when you succeed, and it doesn't leave when you fail. This love isn't something you earn. It's something you're born worthy of. It's the kind of love you always deserved, even if you never received it. This is unconditional love. And if no one gave it to you in your childhood, if your worth was tied to performance, politeness, or perfection, then you've spent most of your life chasing a feeling you should have known from the start. But today, something changes, because today, you stop chasing and you begin to receive. The myth that you had to deserve love. Conditional love teaches a painful lie. You're not lovable until you become someone better. So you became the achiever, the peacemaker, the caretaker, the strong one, the easy one, the quiet one. And yet, no matter how well you played the part, there was always that voice inside whispering, "But do they love the real me?" Virginia Satir taught that love cannot be earned, only received. But when we are raised in a home of conditions, we become love's worker, not its companion. We learn to perform instead of connect. We confuse acceptance with silence. We believe attention is proof of value. It's time to untangle that. You were always lovable from the beginning, before you pleased anyone, before you made anyone proud, before you learned to smile when you wanted to cry. You were already enough. That baby version of you, wide-eyed, fragile, full of feeling, didn't have to do anything to deserve care. You cried and someone came. You existed and you were held. That's the design of real love. Somewhere along the way, that got distorted. You were taught love comes after something, after obedience, after success, after good behavior. But that was not your fault, and it was never the truth. The real definition of love. Let's redefine love, not by what you were taught, but by what you deserve. Unconditional love says, "I see all of you, and I'm not leaving. You don't have to hide to be safe here. You are allowed to be wrong, loud, tired, confused, and still worthy. I don't love a version of you. I love you." This is not fantasy. This is the natural state of real, mature, healing connection. Virginia Satir believed that all people long to be accepted without having to wear a mask. That longing in you is not too much. It's the most human thing about you. Learning to give that love to yourself. If no one offered you unconditional love, it may feel unfamiliar to give it to yourself. You might hesitate. You might hear that inner critic say, "You don't deserve rest. You're being selfish. You should be doing more." When that happens, stop, breathe, and say, "That voice isn't mine. It was handed to me, and I'm choosing a new voice now." Because healing from conditional love isn't just about letting others love you differently. It's about learning to become your own source of love. To look in the mirror and say, "I am allowed to exist. I don't need to prove myself today. I am safe with me." That's how reparenting begins. Choosing relationships that reflect this love. Once you begin to recognize what love truly is, something else happens. You stop settling for what it isn't. You stop accepting love that comes only when you're useful, affection that disappears during conflict, connection based on performance, relationships where your truth is too heavy. You start seeking and creating spaces where you can speak freely, you can be soft and strong. You are loved even when you're not perfect. You are not punished for being human, because you finally understand, if love disappears when I'm honest, it wasn't love. Virginia Satir encouraged people to build new patterns of connection, rooted in openness, acceptance, and mutual respect. You can do that now. You are already doing that now. The gift of becoming your own home. The ultimate healing from conditional love isn't about changing the past. It's about changing the way you show up for yourself today. You may still have moments of doubt. You may still feel the urge to perform. That's okay. But now, you can notice it with compassion. You can say, "That's my old survival speaking, but I'm safe now. I don't have to earn love anymore. You are building something sacred, a relationship with yourself where love is not conditional, where you are your own refuge, your own witness, your own source of worth. This is the love you always needed, and now you're giving it. You are the love you were waiting for. Let this settle in your heart. You no longer need to be the best, be agreeable, be silent, be useful to be loved. You can be tired and still be worthy. You can be imperfect and still be lovable. You can be you, and that's more than enough. You are not broken. You are becoming, and the path you're on is one of return. Return to your truth. Return to your voice. Return to the unconditional love that was always meant for you. Virginia Satir said, "I am me. In all the world, there is no one else exactly like me. Everything that comes out of me is authentically mine, because I alone chose it. And now you choose to love without condition, to live without a mask, to stand in your own worth, no longer waiting to be approved, chosen, or rescued. The love you deserved is here, and it starts with you."